Okay, great. Yes. Good evening, everyone. This is Yield again. I'm taking the call from our Global Campaign Center here in Bonn, Germany. And I'm very excited to talk to you today a bit more about campaigning, how you can develop your own campaign, and everything related to that. But first of all, a warm welcome. Please write your name and a welcome message in the chat if you are online, so we'll be able to track and see who is all participating, as well as we are excited to see your questions and see how we can provide tailor-made answers. So let me start with saying that. Then let me open the presentation and go straight to the content. I hope you all had a great weekend and ready to work another week and yeah, get your advocacy activities up and starting. So I'm now going to open this page. You're going to see my screen. And it's the presentation about basically indeed how to build a campaign for the SDGs. So we will have two parts. The first part I will tell a bit more about two case studies. So two successful campaigns that have been going on in two different parts of the world. One is by our partner My World Mexico, and the other one is by the Sustainable Development Youth in Morocco. I think what those two cases have in common is that they actually both started with an individual, an advocate, who got really passionate about the SDGs and wanted to make a difference in his or her life, but also for the communities and regions and even the country they are living in. So what started with one person like you now, you are advocates. Some of you are already part of bigger networks or bigger organizations. Some of you are just starting. But yeah, to emphasize that it's just the beginning. And by having this mission on your own, you can really grow your activities and you can make it as big and as small as you want. It's really up to you. And this webinar is really to empower you, give you some of the skills and tools, as well as the knowledge on what it's all about, how to campaign for the SDGs, and some handy tools that you can use. Then the second part, I will, after presenting those case studies, I will go a bit more into the toolkit we have shared with you, the How to Campaign toolkit, and also the questions you have received in the guidebook. If you go in your guidebook to page 16 and 17, there we had asked you to write some answers to a certain set of questions, and we'll discuss that in a bit more detail later during the webinar. So by now, you all know what My World 2030 is. You participated, or most of you participated in the webinar last Thursday, in which my colleagues Laura, Guyan, and Ngui talked a bit more about the survey, how to conduct it online and offline, as well as to talk a bit more about the SDGs, the background, how they came to be, and what's basically the next step. So thank you all for that. Now, let me start with giving the two examples of two successful campaigns that we have worked with in the past. The first one is My World Mexico. My World Mexico was started by Carol. She is from Mexico and she was already very involved in the MDGs. And she, after the SDGs were adopted, she thought, what comes next? What can I do? And how can I both hold my government accountable, but also how can I ensure that the people in my community, that they are being heard, that their voices count, and that actually the needs and challenges they face, that those needs and challenges are taken seriously, and actually that solutions are being found, both at local and national level. So that's why she founded the My World Mexico organization. And actually the first step or the first action she undertook was basically translating, one, the survey and some of the other SDG materials. In your case, the translations have already been provided. And if you go to the guidebook, you can find the link to the Trello in which you can download the survey in your unique language. That's for offline. Online, of course, you can just simply click on the language button and then select your language. So this is already be done for you. But in her case, this was for her the first step. And after that, basically, she designed her campaign. She thought, how I'm going to reach as many people as possible. But before asking the question, as many as possible, she was asking herself, who are the people I want to target? Who are the people that I feel at the moment are left out and who need their voices to be heard? So at first, she focused on her own community, her own municipality, and she was able to collect over 30,000 votes. She didn't do it alone. After having had the idea and having did a mapping of her community, she got a number of volunteers on board, as well as she connected with partners such as local universities and the local government. And together they ran the campaign and they collected over 30,000 My World votes. You see in the images on my screen that she went to to schools, to universities, but she also went to other community events. They hold a massive mobilization, printing out the ballots so people could take it right where they were on the street, in the classrooms, as well as on many different ways. And after having collected this information, she thought, okay, what am I going to do with the data now? Well, first of all, she presented to local policymakers, who then had a look at the survey, at the outcomes, and based on those outcomes, they hold some follow-up discussions. So let's say, for example, if the outcome of the survey is that, well, the most important priority is education, and then afterwards the second priority is employment, then they hold follow-up discussions to find out what actually related to employment is the real problem. What related to education is the real problem. Is it access to education, or is it the quality of education? The same with employment. Are there not enough jobs? Are there not enough quality jobs? What is really the nitty-gritty that is the problem? So based on that information, then policymakers can make adjustments and better policies and interventions. So when you do your campaign and when you design it, of course, in your mandate, we have said your mandate is to collect at least 500 My World votes. But what we think is very important is that when you going to collect those votes, that you think, who do I want to target? Why do I want to target them? And when I have the outcomes, how am I going to present them? And what are the next steps? And that's what I'm going to take you through today. But to continue the example, after having collected over 30,000 votes in the first year, you see that Carol came to New York, to our headquarters, and she presented some of those outcomes during several high-level meetings. On the left top, you see her in the middle sitting with the goal number 5, gender equality. And in the background, you see 3 of my colleagues standing. Chavi, who is our focal point for Europe, Kristen, who is leading on our UN 3R portfolio, and Christina, who is our communication specialist. Then, to end the example, she was able to present those outcomes, both in New York as well as national level. And as you see on the right, there's the sign Mexico Agenda 2030. She was able, with all the data she had collected, to feed directly into the process and the planning of Mexico on how they are going to nationalize and localize the agenda, and what measures and actions need to be taken for that. So that's an example how she went from first making a plan, start collecting data, going to universities, to presenting the data and actually being also part of the implementation and follow-up process. That's the first example I would like to share. The second example is the Sustainable Development Youth in Morocco. They came to the Global Festival of Action, a yearly festival we organize every year in Bonn last year. So they came in 2017. And it was just their coming as an individual, as being advocates and wanting to know more about the SDGs. And during the festival, they got inspired by the work of My Old Mexico and by the work of some other advocates. So 3 of the festival participants from Morocco decided to join hands, and together they founded the organization Sustainable Development Network Morocco. And after having established the organization, they set a mandate, and they were going to collect My World votes to represent voices of Morocco all across the country, so across all the 10 or 15 regions. They work together with different coordinators in each of the regions, and then after that they were able to collect over 17,000 votes. But more important than the number of votes they collected is the follow-up actions. And because they worked together on the different regional levels, they were able to meet with regional stakeholders who took the outcomes very seriously, and also start thinking about how that could be translated in the implementation phase. Next to that, they organized a big event in Marrakesh, in which they hold a Sustainable Development Carnival. And what they taught is that through dance and music, we bring all countries from the world together. So they took it quite literally and invited all the ambassadors to Morocco. So let's say the ambassador from Netherlands to Morocco, but also the ambassador from Ghana to Morocco, and the ambassador from Nigeria to Morocco, and the ambassador from Singapore to Morocco. So all the ambassadors, meaning all countries represented, came together on that day to, on the one hand, share serious work, so talk about policies, talk about the outcomes, but at the same moment using the tools of music and dancing to really unite and form a front together on this. So that was another great example, and thinking out of the box of what kind of activities you can use to actually bring people together and to promote the SDGs and sustainable development. So that was the very brief, the first part, and the 2 case studies I would like to present. Is there, related to the both cases I just presented, do you already have any questions? If so, feel free to ask them now. If not, you can always come back to them at a later point. Let's see if we have any questions coming in so far. So far, no questions. Okay. Then let me say that those stories of both the Sustainable Development Youth in Morocco, as well as the My World Mexico example, both can be found in the Impact Stories toolkit. So if you open that toolkit, you can read about it in more detail. And I'm also able to provide you with their contact information if you would be interested in it, because they're always open to have a talk with you, to share some of their experience and work. They had liked to join, but unfortunately, due to time differences, they were unable to join in today. But maybe at a later point, we will bring them in. Okay, great. So now, after having shared two successful stories, now we're going to look at how can we replicate the success, and more importantly, how can we create a campaign? How can you create a campaign that is fit for your local context, your region, your community, your university, or even your national level? And what tools do you need to use for that? And what questions do you need to ask for yourself? I hope that you all can have a look at the toolkit now. I'm sure that you already had a look at page 16, 17, 18, in which we talk a bit more about creating your own strategy, about what are the questions, what is important, how to bring partners, how to build a coalition. Are you going to do it online or offline? And that's all what I would like to talk to you about more now. So now for this part, I'm using actually the toolkit we also share with you on campaigning for My World, how to campaign. And I'm going to walk through this toolkit and give you some examples, some useful tips, as well as ask some key questions that you either maybe already have answered yourself, or if you haven't answered them so far, you should answer them in the coming days, basically, when designing. The first part of the toolkit is about campaigning for the SDGs and why it's important. I think we have already touched upon this many times through the different webinars, doing explaining My World, all of that. But if you want to read a bit more about it, please feel free to read it. After that, the first step is, of course, setting your campaign objectives. What is the purpose and what are your objectives? What do you exactly want to achieve? How are you going to measure if you achieve it, and all of that? On the one hand, it would be very easy for you to say, well, my objective is basically the mandate you got for us and the deliverables you have. So your objective could be, I want to collect 500 My World votes, and I want to collect 5 Humans of My World stories, and I'm going to write a blog post, and I do organize a handover event, whether alone or jointly with some of your other advocates. That's totally fine. That fits within the program, and you will achieve the goals we have set for you. But at the same moment, I think that you all can do more, and actually you can create a bigger impact by thinking about the key questions. So not starting with thinking I have to collect 500 My World votes, but starting with the question, what is the impact I want to see? And for that, we have created the theory of change, as we call it. And the theory of change asks a few very important questions. And the first block of the theory of change is basically, who do you want to give a voice? Whose voices you think at the moment are not heard? So when you have a look at this block, it has the first 3 questions. Who are the individuals, groups, and communities you want to target? And with this, try not only to focus on the number, so trying to reach as many as possible, but also think about, why is their voice important? Have those groups been excluded before? And also, how are you going to reach them? So in the case you are living in a community, or you're living in a city, let's say I'm living here in Bonn, Germany, am I going to target university students? Or am I going to target my fellow colleagues who work here at the UN premises, who are already very much aware of the SDGs? Or I'm going to target people outside this box? And I think that's something you should ask for yourself. There is no good or bad. It's really up to you to decide who do you think is important. And it's good for you to think about it. Why does their voice matter? And also, how are you going to reach them? Is the best way to reach them through an online campaign? In the case you focus on young people, you probably find many of them online. Or in the case if you're going to focus on maybe more marginalized communities, or people who maybe don't have access to some of those, to internet, or to have mobile phone, all of that, then you maybe want to use a different tactic or strategy. So that's the first part. Who are you going to focus on? Who do you want to give a voice? And why do you think it's important that their voice matters, basically? Then the second part of the box is building evidence by bringing together disparate voices. And that's now the case, it's about a bit of your targets. So the first question is, how many voices do you think you need to present a strong case of evidence? And this then comes into your target. Are you going to target the 500 votes that we said as your deliverable? Or maybe you need more voices, or maybe you need more voices from different communities or different origins. So that's really up to you to think about it. And it's also really up to you to decide your scope. If you do the 500, that's brilliant. We are very happy with that. But if you think that you both have the time and the capacity to organize and mobilize more people to collect more votes, then that's also fine. And we also would, of course, support and applaud that. Then the second question is, what activities need to be carried out to collect this information? This comes a bit back to what is the strategy? Are you going to use online, offline? Are you going to collect the votes by going through the streets, or in the case of your community, is there like a strong religious point or event where you can go out and collect this information? Or is there a sporting activity, or is there a national holiday which is all in the purpose of volunteering or something else? So really think about around what kind of activities you're going to use, and around what teams you can link them with to make it easier for yourself to mobilize and carry them out. And then the last question here is, which resources are needed to make your campaign successful? And I will talk a bit more about this later on. As we have explained before, unfortunately at the moment we don't have any funding available for you. So when it comes to resources, you need to think about possible partnerships and see how you can be smart about that. And for that, I give you some examples later on. Then the third building block is influencing people in power and changing how they think and act. And that really comes down to the ultimate impact you want to have. So after having collected the data, after having carried the information, carry out the activities and collected the information, what are you going to do with all of that information, with all of that data and all of those stories, pictures, photographs, videos, and whatever it is you have been able to collect? And it's important to ask this question at the beginning rather than at the end of your activities, so that you can steer them and adjust them so that everything follows smoothly, and that you're not coming to meet a policy maker, or you're going to meet a minister and then he said, well, okay, you have collected the data, but what should I do with it? And then if you don't have the answer yourself, then it's even more difficult to convince the people you want to target. So in this box, the questions are, who are the individuals and institutions you need to convince? So are you targeting individuals or institutions at the local level? So do you want to convince your local mayor or your local municipality group of people? Or do you want to convince the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Youth Development? And who within those ministries are the people? And how is decision making work within those institutions or with these individuals? Is it a person at local level who makes a decision, or is it something at national level? When are decisions being made, and what kind of information do you need to actually convince them of doing the right thing, or of listening to you? So that also comes down to the question, why would they be interested in listening to you? What do you have to offer them? And the last part is, how are you going to reach them? From experience, we can tell you that that policymakers, not always from the first meeting or first thought, are interested in listening to a single voice. They would say, why would I meet you when there are so many other young people in the country? But if you're able to make that case, to say, for example, well, I've been working together with the UN SDG Action Campaign, and I've been working together with some other partners in the field, and together we've been able to reach out to X number of people. We collected that data, we collected the stories. So I'm standing here today in front of you, not just me as a person, not just me as, for example, myself, Yield, but I'm standing here on behalf of all those other young people we have spoken to, which stories we have collected, whose data we have been able to manage, who have spoken out, who have raised their opinions, who have raised their voices. And on behalf of all of them, we present you the outcomes. But at the same moment, we don't only want to present them to you, we also want you to take follow-up actions. And actually, some of those actions could be A, B, C. or DEF, depending on both your outcomes and depending on what you would require from them, basically. So think about this very clearly before you start conducting activities, because if you know from the beginning, like, this is the final aim we are working towards, it's easier to guide everything in the same process. For example, when I was an advocate and I collected my world data, we thought, well, if we only collect data from the survey, we have to show in the end, it shows that, well, the survey from 10,000 people shows that the first priority in, let's say, for example, Ghana is access to education. The second one is access to water. And the third one is the infrastructure. But if you have this data, it's of course very important. You can even showcase what is the difference between young people and elderly people. But then what we did as follow-up event is that we organized a kind of focus groups, or we call them multi-stakeholder days, in which we, based on those list of priorities, we then hold a consultation to go deeper into it, to see what is the real problem when it comes to access to water, what is the real problem when it comes to employment, for example. So when you dive deeper into this and you're able to collect that information, now when you meet a policymaker, for example, you're not only talking about the importance of a priority, but you also have more detailed information that might help them in shaping all of this. And then the last box is the positive change in society towards the SDGs. So by having gone through all the first 3 steps, by having carried out your activities, collected the information, and met with policy makers, having been able to convince them to make better change, actually, you have ensured that the voices of your community are not left behind, that they are part of the discussions, and hopefully also that decisions have been made in their favor, so that altogether you have contributed to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in the Agenda 2030. So that's in a brief overview the theory of change, and a number of questions that are important to think about and important to answer on your way and in the process of designing your own strategies and planning your activities and all of that. It's very extensive. Of course, depending on the scale of your activities, you can do it as small and as big as you want yourself. And both is great, and both we are very happy with. If you have any questions, please just ask them in the chat function. And if not, we're also able to answer some of them during the cluster calls on Wednesday. Well, then the next part comes after you now have decided on your purpose, you've decided on your objectives, which are mentioned on page 16 of your guidebook. Those questions, I think, are answered by now. Then the next part says about building your movement, build a coalition, build your partnerships. The first part of this toolkit talks about building your own team. As we said before, it's really up to you if you want to collect and conduct your activities as an individual, as an advocate selected of this program, or if you want to bring more people on board. For example, your friends, your classmates, your colleagues, or to work together with, for example, some of the other advocates in your country or in your city, or even beyond. So this part helps you to talk a bit about the team, what kind of resources you need, what kind of roles you could possibly people have helping you with. People you could appoint people who help you with communications, people who help you with organizing events, or any other kind of resources you would need. And there are also some tips which tell you how can you keep the group together, how can you keep them motivated, and how can you have all of them work together towards the same goal. And I think with this, it's important to mention when you're creating your team, or in the moment you're designing a team, on the one hand, you will have a lot of benefits. A team will help you to go further, to do more, all of that. But it also is time. It costs time. You have to manage the team. You have to build a relation of trust between them. And at the same moment, when you appoint people or start working with people, especially since it's a voluntary position, it's you really have to make sure that you can count on that commitment. Because in the end of the day, you are responsible as advocate for some of the deliverables to us, but you're responsible for yourself, and you want to reach a certain target, and you want to receive some goals. So it could be very frustrating to start working with some people, to spend time with them in briefing them, and then having dropped them out without actually contributing, but actually taking more time than you benefit from them. So that's what I would wanted to mention in terms of building a team. And feel free if you have questions for that. Also, in case you decide that you would like to build your team, You can always reach out to us. As I said before, we have received over 350 applications, and we are happy to reach out to them and ask them if they are willing to work together with you. So what we could do is we could send out an email to them, asking them if they're okay with us sending their information to you, so that you will receive the information of some of the advocates who haven't been selected. You could then reach out to them and see if they want to partner with you. That's on how to build your team. Now on mobilizing supporters, how to build a coalition. It's of course important that when you're doing your activities, when you're planning your campaign, all of that, the more people know about it, the further you come. So it's important to think about, hey, who are people who could promote my message, whether it is by sharing them online or by actually participating offline, whether it is by following you on social media, or actually take up real positions and actually also help with volunteering activities. It's the part of mobilizing supporters. And the most important part of that is, of course, building partnerships and creating partnerships. And this comes back to also the first questions we asked during the theory of change. What kind of resources do you need to achieve your goals, your objectives, your activities? And it's important to think smart about this. Think about, first of all, think about what do you need concretely. So sometimes it's not only about I need money to conduct X, Y, Z, but sometimes you could also work with companies who could offer those services for free. So instead of offering you money, they can offer you the service. And we have listed some examples in this toolkit. For example, for the Humans of My World stories you're going to collect. For those of you who already have a good phone, a phone with a good camera, you can use that. For those of you who don't have a phone or who don't have a camera or whatever it is, for whatever reason it is, you could think about what kind of companies can I approach which help me in that process. So an example of one of our partners, Building Bridges, they made a partnership with Canon, and then Canon supported and donated some of the cameras for the project. And then they were also some of the partners doing the printing of the book that I showed during one of the previous webinars. So that's one example. Another example is from the SDG youth movement in Morocco. They partnered with a local company called ASEAN, and that's a big printing company in Morocco, in the country. And they offered them to print all the ballot papers for free, as well as some posters and other promotional materials. So instead of you having to print 500 ballot papers, for you to having to print some posters to promote your campaign and your activities, you work with a printing company, and for them it's often good promotion as well, and it's little cost, and for you it helps you going a long way. Some of the other examples is that when actually the previous examples I named wanted to come to New York to present some of the outcomes, they partner either with a local aircraft company, so for example Aero Mexico, and they provided all the flight tickets to go for them from Mexico to New York. We have the SDG youth movement in Morocco, who partnered with the Ibis Hotels group, and they actually funded the accommodation for participants. So they organized a big event in the capital city, in Rabat, and they invited over 250 young people from all over the country, from different regions, to attend that forum. And then the Ibis Hotel group said, well, we will provide the accommodation for free. So these are just some examples of how you can be smart about resources, how you could create partnerships that both benefit yourself as well as some of those companies. Other examples are, of course, the university. In the case of My World Mexico, the university helped to analyze this first 30,000 votes, to basically make an analysis of all of the votes collected and information and present that in a report. At the moment, we also have we have also our data analysis tools online, and to make visualizations and all of that. And Gaia, my colleague, has talked a bit more about that during the webinar on Friday already. So that's something we also can benefit from. And of course, there are also other partnerships with universities who could help you to share the message with their students, to help you in printing and many other things. There are also the UN country teams, which we're going to introduce you with later this week. In some cases, those teams might be able to help you a long way. In other cases, they will maybe just help you with spreading the word on social media. So that's really depending on the case. But it also very much depends on the strategy. and the proposal or the program you present to them. So based on that, they might be able to help more or less, and depending on the context, basically. So this is all about building partnerships. But again, before you're going to start and reach out to partners out of the blue, really think about it. Are you going to look for short-term, long-term partners? What is your plan? What are your activities? What impact do you aim to have? What are you going to do when you have collected all this data? Because all of this will be questions that are asked by partners and or potential partners. And if you have a clear answer, a clear story, a clear strategy, that will really help you to bring them on board. From my experience, I think that at least in my case in the Netherlands, it was relatively easy for us to get partners. But before we reached out to them, we really spent a good amount of time on deciding our strategy, deciding our story. And when we had that story finally together, then we could go out to partners. And when they asked us questions, we had the answers. So that's something I would really give to you, is really think about the strategy, about the story, about everything you're going to do first. And once you have all of that in place, then it's easier for you to reach out to partners and work together with others. And also for yourself, it's easier because you have a clear sense of direction. Okay, so that discussed the questions on page 17 of your guidebook. Now the part comes to planning and take action, basically. And here we have listed a number of activities that you could do when you organize an event or when you're trying to collect votes. First of all, we have a checklist, and if you go to the checklist, this will really help you to come up with the right activities, ideas, timeline, and resources you need to actually carry them out. So we would really encourage you to use that checklist when you're going to brainstorm, when you're going to design your ideas and activities. But we also want to show some of the ideas of activities that have been taking place in the past. One is, for example, to set up a My World 2030 voting booth in your community or university or working place. It's very easy. People, if you put it on a place that is very visual, people will be able to see it. People will pass by. They will fill out the ballot paper either online or offline, and before you know it, you have many votes coming in. But at the same moment, by having a booth there, you will be able to stand there in person, either yourself or some of your volunteers, and you'll be able to have an interaction. When people vote online, they will take a vote, and after that, it's difficult for you to follow up with them or to actually have a personal conversation. But if you have a booth, people will step to it, and you can really have that conversation. So that's on the one hand beneficial. On the other hand, it could be a bit time consuming if you spend a lot of time standing behind a booth. Well, if, for example, if you hold a lecture in the university hall, you reach at once 200 or 500 people, depending on the size. You can do a brief presentation, so you can give everyone information about the SDGs, but at the same moment, you're able to collect their votes. So that's a way to reach more people, but at the same moment, you can still have a meaningful interaction. Other things that are listed are, for example, some of the tips I mentioned before. If you link it with international days, if you organize your activities focusing, for example, specifically on marginalized people or groups or anything else. And in this, we will also say it's if possible, it's important that you share your work with the local media, because they often help to reach out a lot further. And often, based from our experience, the media is very interested in those stories, because for you working together with the UN, an organization with a global mandate operating all around the world, that such an organization is going to partner with someone from their city or from their community or from their region, that often already is a reason for the media to either interview you or to ask more about the work you do and show actually some of the activities. It's for media always very tempting to say that, well, hey, the stories of the people in Singapore, or maybe even in a community of Singapore, are now brought under the attention of the high-level policymakers in New York or of the capital city. That's often something that sells, and often something the media is very willing and open to report, especially if it is for such a aim as the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's some advice on that. Now is a section in the guidebook on how to communicate. Go online, go offline, all of that. And as you've seen in the calendar, next week we have a webinar on basically how to increase your online impact. And during that webinar, we have my colleagues Christina and Marta, who are both communication specialists, as well as my colleague Gayan, who already briefly presented during the webinar on Friday. We have them leading this webinar, really explaining you step by step on how to make the most of your online presence. So what do you need to do? What works? What doesn't work? Where should you put your focus on? Basically all of that. So all of that will be happening next week. So stay tuned for that and make sure that you will join that session.
There's a question from Nen. He's asking if I have friends who want to join me in the campaign, will they get credit from the board?
Okay, great. So there's one question coming in about basically what we just said, and the question.
You can repeat the question, please. Oh.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question. My colleague was just reading it out. The question is, if I have friends to join me in this campaign, will they get credit from the board? Meaning, will they also get recognition? Like we as advocates, at the end of the program, you get an official certificate saying that you are part of this program and listing some of your achievements. For those who are becoming part of your team, and it's more than just being a volunteer and helping 1 hour with designing a flyer or something else, but if they really become part of your team and engage meaningfully in your campaign, we are able to provide them also with a certificate of knowledge or participation. We have to look at the exact design of that, because of course for all of you advocates, you will receive a official certificate outlining your work, your achievements, all of that. But I'm sure we will be able to find a format to also credit and acknowledge your team members, basically. So that's something we will work on, and we will be able to ensure that that's also ready, because we think everyone working on this goal deserves acknowledgements and deserves to receive and get something out of it, especially as it will help you in your further engagement, careers, future steps you're going to take. This is a section on get in touch with the local media. I already shared some information on this. Our communications colleagues next week, they might be able to share also a draft press release with you that you can use and fine tune. So that's there. Then the last part of this toolkit is really about taking action or making an impact. And this comes back to also the step 3 of the theory of change. Who are the individual institutions you need to convince? Why would they be interested in listening to you? And how are you going to reach them? Of course, we will help you to bring the voices of your people to the global level. We'll present them during different high-level meetings in New York, for example, the UN General Assembly. We group them with all the other data and stories and tools and information we collect throughout the year. So you can make sure that no matter what, that is something that we will do with your data and something that's going to happen. But of course, it's also very important to see what you can do at the local and national level. And I think for that, it's very important to have a look at those questions, and based on those questions, make your strategy. And it could be as small as saying, well, I'm going to target one university, and that university has 2,000 students. I'm trying to reach 500 of them. And with the outcome, we present this back to the university board. And then based on this data, the university board is going to set up a focus group. And then with this focus group and the more detailed outcome, they're going to see how they can make some or implement some changes at the university. So it's as easy as that. And it could be going much bigger, going to really regional and national level, which you try to meet with policymakers and ministers and all of that. And the same counts for your mandate, basically. Your mandate is from now till the end of September, and in that period, we have set you up with a certain set of deliverables we expect from you. But what we really hope is that even after the program, you continue to be an advocate, that you remain passionate about the SDGs, that you remain creating change based both on your daily lives as well as keep inspiring others. So as I said in the beginning, the examples of Morocco and of Mexico, they also really started out with being an advocate. They didn't even get acknowledged by us. They didn't get appointed by the UN. They became as an advocate, like many of you are. And basically from starting with a few activities and starting with a small plan, they grew to big organizations who have many members and actually have employees as well at the moment. So that's something you can take in the back of your mind, and it's not something we expect from you, but yeah, we hope that you are in this for the long run, so that even when the program finishes, remain an advocate, remain part of the group of young change makers who is leading in their own way. It can be by taking action in your own way. It can be in your future job, in your career, or it could be by creating a movement that keeps on collecting data and keeps on meeting with government officials to really make sure that everyone's voices are heard, that real policy changes are being part of it. And for those of you already part of big organizations, feel free to also include this in your work and use it as a tool to both go further and reach more with your organization, create more impact, as well as a way to also get this official recognition and being part of the bigger mandate of the UN. So that's what I had to say on that. So that also comes back here in this focus on having local versus global impact. That's in a brief overview the important things of campaigning in this toolkit. We will share with you by tomorrow a reporting format. So that format and that template you can use to report back to us on your progress in both June, July, August, and September. So at the end of each month, we would love to hear from you. The plans that, especially in the beginning, the plans that you have been able to come up with, your strategy, the activities you are looking at, as well as later on reporting on the outcomes. Have they been successful? What challenges did you face? Is there some areas where you need extra support from us, and anything else that is related? So we will share those report formats with you by tomorrow. So when you're now thinking about your strategy, when you have gone through the different toolkits, when you have attended all these webinars, you have now a clear sense of direction. And yeah, we're very excited to hear back from you on what you make of it. How to develop this? What are the crazy ideas you have? What are the plans you make? What are the partners you can work with or come up with? And most of all, in the end, what is the impact you're going to have? Local, regional, national, it's all very important. And we're very excited to receive all of that information, to read your Humans of My World stories, and anything else that you have come up with or that you have found out. So I think that's it for us for today. We now look at some of the questions that have been asked. 2 questions coming in from Shafkat. Are there any media outlets provided by My World, the UN SDG Action Campaign, UNDP Bangkok, UN Volunteers, or anything else that you can update about your work? That's a very good question. When you have the call next week with my colleagues from the communication department, they have a lot of contacts with international partners. So when you have stories that are relevant for them, we will be able to. You can request us. We will be able to share them with you. We will also. You are in contact, of course, with the UNDP Bangkok Center already. Nadine and Hani, you have met them during our previous calls. They have a large network of media outlets in the region, so you will be able to reach out to them and see if they can help you link up with some of those media outlets. And I think that's also very important where the country offices come in. So when we are going to make those connections later this week, we will definitely point out to them that one of the areas they could possibly support you is actually by help you promoting and sharing the stories with local and national media outlets. So I will write it down here, and I will follow up with them, both the country offices as well as the UNDP Bangkok Regional Center, to see how we can share those contacts best with you. Is it by us making the introduction, or is it by us just providing you with the contacts and you approach them directly? Okay, then another question is, can we do a feature that can be published in My World or UNDP website newsletter? Yes, that's very much possible, and that's very easy. For all of you, I think in the deliverables we have said write 1 blog post. So when you have a blog post ready, it can be in the end, or compiling all the things you have done, but it could also already now about basically starting your work. Feel free to share it with us. We will always be able to share the link on Twitter. We'll be able to share it on Facebook, and we'll also be able to publish it on our own website, on our own pages. For UNDP Bangkok, that's my colleagues, of course, in the Bangkok office, so I can't speak for them. But I'm sure that if you have a quality post and something important to say, they're able to also post that on their profiles, content, all of that. And then in terms for example, the Humans of My World stories you're going to collect, we will be able to share them during international exhibitions and all of that. Okay, then the second question is from you. Even if it's not an official capacity as an advocate, can we expect support from My World or friends of My World? What may be the scope of assistance? So, okay, can you? I don't get exactly what you mean. Oh, continuing about advocate. Yes. So even after the program, sorry for my misunderstanding. Yes, even after the program, we are happy to continue supporting you in your work, whatever it is with materials, whatever it is with working together on writing a proposal to a local foundation or to the government or whatever it is. We are very much open to that and see how we can join hands even beyond the actual program. For example, with the My World Mexico, we after the advocacy, basically as an individual advocate, we really start working with them as a partner. We are going to organize jointly, most likely, a bigger festival or event in Mexico later this year. And the same counts for the youth development, youth sustainable development Morocco. So yes, we are very much open to working with you beyond the program, see how best we can support you and all of that. And I think really we can, it really depends on you and your organization to what extent that partnership can go. And for us, it's really, we would love to work with everyone, but of course we only have so much time and so much hands as we have available. So the more you put into it in terms of thinking, of course, of planning and all of that, the more we also can provide you with support from our side and see how we can level it up and really make big things happening together. So we are very excited for that. Okay, thanks for those questions. Now I'm seeing comments coming in from Lepin. Okay, so he has a question about the speed of the internet, saying that in some parts the internet connection is too slow to conduct a survey. Well, one thing that I can say is that in places where there is limited internet access or where the internet is not working, you can always do it the traditional way. So either conducting the survey offline, so printing out the paper ballots and having the survey conducted in that way. That's of course the easiest way. The other way, in terms of connection, I think
they can work with me to improve the connection loading.
Okay, I was just looking at my my colleague Guyan, our digital strategist, and he said that you can work directly with my colleague Guyan. You can reach out to him. I will share his contact information, and then he will be able to see if he can fix something. So you can work together on seeing if you can increase the loading speeds and where exactly is the problem. So in case that happens, you can reach out to him directly, and then he will be able to explore if there's something that we can do about it. But in case if the connection is just very poor, then of course the other way I would suggest is going offline and using the offline survey format. Okay, that were the questions for now. Is there anything else you want to ask? Maybe saying that before that, maybe pointing out at the webinar we have on Wednesday, not a webinar, actually, the cluster calls. We're very excited to talk to all of you then. You will be able, and what we also would like you to do is that you briefly present some of your initial thoughts. So who are you thinking to target? Why do you want to target them? Who would you like to partner with? All of that. We can already provide feedback on that then directly. And of course, we will also provide feedback later on when you send in your reporting template, basically. And based on that, we will also be able to see how we can best assist you. So maybe you have certain strategies or partners we already have connections with. We will be able to make those introductions for you, so it helps you get in touch with them more easily. The other way it could be is anything else that we were able to come up with. During the webinar, during the cluster calls, we will also ask you to think about resources you would need from our side and would like to have. We have now held a series of webinars on how to create a campaign, on My World, on how to increase your online impact that will happen next week. But in case there is anything else you would like to have from us, for example, a webinar on XYZ, then this Wednesday is your chance to raise that. And we will collect all the input, and based on that, we will see how we can organize more ways of support, whether it is through webinars or through other ways, to really get you up to speed and assist you the best we can. Guyan just shared his Twitter profile, so you can tweet using @GuyanPeries. So I think that's it very much from our side. Very excited to work with all of you. It's still a Monday here in Bonn. It's almost becoming 2 p.m. And we're looking forward to making this a success. I can't wait for Wednesday to hear more of your plans, strategies, potential partners. And in the meanwhile, we keep building the movement and keep on raising awareness for the SDGs and help with implementation of projects all around the world. So thank you very much for your time, also from all my colleagues here in Bonn, and we're looking forward to continue the conversation. Okay.